Hello and welcome back to my stream. So this is on the series of game development with Phaser. This is probably the first of a few series that's going to happen, but I think this will actually close out the first series. So I'll give a recap in just a second, but for logistical purposes, I am live. So I'm streaming live on Twitch. If you have any questions along the way, please stop me. I'm paying attention to the chat. I'm just glancing over at my other monitor here. So definitely engage. It makes it a more fun experience. Oh, you're looking at the AdSense on my blog. you got me confused there for a second, Crutchcorn. Anyways, so if there are any kind of glitches in my audio or glitches in the video, please let me know, because otherwise I'm not going to know about them. So if the font's too small, if you can't hear me, maybe I'm too loud, maybe it's frozen altogether, let me know. Point it out. I'll try my best to fix it, and we'll see where it goes. So as far as what we're trying to do on this particular stream series, so I think this is the fourth stream or the third stream, somewhere along the lines of that. They're all on YouTube if you want to catch up. But the goal was to recreate a game that I had created in 2014. So this is probably my first ever blog post, or at least one of the first ever ones. The goal was to create a game that I created at what's called Turboprop. So I'll hit play on this YouTube video. Like I had mentioned in the previous streams, this was built in Unity. I don't think I have any of the source code for this game. Not a problem. We're just recreating it this time around in Phaser. I'll show you where we got in the previous streams, and we're just going to add to it. The focus of this particular stream is going to be around adding sound to our game, as well as adding more scenes to the game. So that way maybe we have a game over scene, a main gameplay scene, something like that. So I will go ahead and stop this. We don't need to see this again, at least not until the end of the stream. I will open up my Visual Studio Code, and I will run the project where we left off. So this is exactly where we left off. I haven't touched it since. Stream stop. What does stream stop mean? Maybe you can run it by me, and I will. I'll see if I can address it. Let me know. I'll glance back over. Let's go ahead and say serve. So I'm going to serve this Phaser project. I am going to go back into my web browser. I'm going to just open up a new tab here. And this is where we left off. So it's not exactly what we saw in the YouTube video that I had done in 2014, but it's similar. We've got a plane, it's animated. We can click around on the screen to collect the coins, to increase our score, and if we crash into any of these obstacles, we explode and it starts over. So ideally what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to a game over screen, and every time we hit a coin or a obstacle, we want to play a sound effect. And we're going to create those. Best error, user error. All right, I'm going to assume that you've got it fixed, Sando-kun. But all good. If you do run into trouble, let me know. So let's go ahead and start working towards this. But actually, first, what I want to do is I want to clean up some of the code that we've already done in the previous streams, and that should kind of refresh our memory on where we stand. So that way, if you're new to this series, at least you'll be able to catch up a little bit. So let's go ahead and see. So just give me 1 second. What we're going to do first is we're actually going to move it into a dedicated scene file. And we're going to strip stuff out along the way. So right now everything exists in the index.html file as far as code, and then we have an assets directory with all of our image files and things like that. So I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to create a new file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this maybe gameplay scene, and this is a JavaScript file. Go into the index.html file, and I'm going to include it as a script. So like I said, we're going to be adding numerous scenes, but we're also going to do code cleanup. And I promise you, we're going to see how everything works as we shuffle things around. So that way it's a good catch-up lesson. I'm going to say source, and I'm going to say gameplay scene.js JavaScript. I'm going to go one step. Actually, I'm going to leave it like that. If we do run into trouble, I will add a period and a slash there for a relative directory. I don't think we're going to run into trouble, but you never know. All right, so inside of this gameplay scene, let's start creating it. And this is a Phaser 3 scene. You don't have to create a separate file for a separate scene, but it does add a lot of maintainability, because then you don't have 100 different scenes in the same file, and then you lose track of things and it becomes a big mess. So let's go ahead and check it out. So let's go ahead and say maybe var gameplay scene, giving it a name here, equals new phaser dot class, and we're going to say extends. We're going to say phaser dot scene. We're going to say initialize, and this is straight out of the phaser documentation too. We're going to say function, and we're going to say phaser dot scene dot call. We're going to pass in the scope, and we're going to give it a key, so that way this key can be used when we want to switch to this particular scene. So we're going to say key, and let's go ahead and call it gameplay scene for consistency purposes. That's kind of the boilerplate of a phaser scene, but we also want to be able to handle our life cycle events. So the question coming in, is phaser a global object? So this is part of the class. So I believe it's a global object. So we're including it here, and it's more or less gonna somehow, I don't know how it works honestly, but it's gonna take the classes out of this particular framework. It does JavaScript voodoo. Definitely don't call myself a JavaScript expert, more of a JavaScript user, but it does something magical. But what I want to do is I want to add my lifecycle function, similar to what I had in the index file. So I have init, preload, create. So basically I want the same things. So I'm going to say init, and I'm going to say function. I'm going to say preload, also function. Let's go ahead and say create. And update. All right, so now basically what we want to do is we want to start copying stuff over. So let's start doing that. We'll start with the preload, because it doesn't look like we did init scene here. So I'm going to copy this, and then we're just going to comment it out along the way as well. We won't fully remove it yet, but if I paste it in, what we're saying here is we are loading our images. We have a sprite atlas. So this sprite atlas is our sprite sheet that's been compacted, so that way it's not a uniform sprite sheet. We do have a JSON file with kind of a map to where each component goes. We have our sprites physics, which we're actually not going to use. So I think we removed it in the previous lesson. This is if we wanted to use the Matter.js physics engine rather than the arcade physics. But we kind of determined that arcade physics was fine for this example. So we're not going to use it. Part of our cleanup. Then we have a Bitcoin and an obstacle. So that looks not bad. And all of our files are inside of our assets directory. Let's go ahead and go to the create scene. Actually, quite long. Maybe we want to start with update scene. We'll start with the create. We'll just go down the line. So I'm going to copy this, and we're gonna do some cleanup as we paste it in, just to see what we're using. I think there's a lot of stuff that we're not actually using, and we just haven't removed it. And I noticed that I put it inside the init. Let me fix that in just a second. It should actually be in the preload. Oops, right here. And do that so that way I don't mess it up again. I think we will revisit the init at some point in this tutorial or this stream, but for now we can leave it like that. So we just pasted a bunch of stuff in. So up until now we've kind of used these global variables rather than phaser class variables or member variables. I think what we want to do is we want to keep it more phaser oriented and strictly keep them as member variables. So we're going to start doing some conversions. It's not absolutely necessary, but it'll help us in the long run. So for example, this dot clouds blue, and we're just gonna prefix this to a lot of things. So we have our clouds, 3 different versions of it. We have our score. I could do a find if I wanted to, but it's best if we go probably line by line, figure out what's going on. So with the score, this is just our text. We're storing it in a variable so that way we can update it later. We're setting the depth so that way the objects don't go in front of the score. We want the score to be sitting on top. It's kind of like the Z index when working with CSS. Let's go ahead and look at our animations. They look good. Those don't need to change. We're not using the sprite physics. I removed that. So let's go ahead and remove this here as well. We're looking at plane. Let's go ahead and I'll do this. Then I'll come back and fix it. So let's say maybe this dot plane. I did a multiple replace there, and then fix that. We're going to do the same thing with our Bitcoin group. So as far as the plane goes, we have a sprite. It has physics associated to it. Again, we're working with the depth of it. Image was kind of large, so we shrunk it. We have data information, so that has to do with the score, and that has to do with where the plane is. We set 3 positions: a top, a middle, and a bottom, and that really basically says where are we allowed to move to. And we'll explore again in just a second. We're going to play that fly animation. Go ahead and say this dot Bitcoin group, and this dot obstacle group. Just using Bitcoin again because at the time Bitcoin was cool. I don't think it's cool anymore, at least me personally. But you could use any kind of coin or any kind of thing that is rewarding. Doesn't matter. So Bitcoin group, obstacle group. Yo Adrian is now hosting me. Ooh, thanks for the hosting. Dogecoin is where it's at. Yeah, that's with the Shibu. Or is it the Husky? Something like that. To the moon, right? In before Ocean Bit ICO. All right. Let me know how that goes, Crutch Corn. So our obstacle group, we just locally we created a member variable of it. We're just doing a little bit more cleanup here. The more exciting stuff is going to come after we get this into its own scene file. Yo Kukakato, thanks for joining. Glad to have you here. All right, let's see where we go. All right, so this we have our timer. This is where we actually start pulling objects out of our object pool. If I go back to my web browser, it's still run, but I don't want to refresh. But the object pool would be these obstacles as well as the coins. Let's go ahead and fix that up. So we have the position that can stay, the positions. So if we look back at our index.html file, we have positions Y. I do want to keep those. So I'm going to copy that array. And I am going to go to my init function. So this is where I'm actually going to make use of the init. So I am going to say this dot positions Y equals that array. That way, inside of my create, what I can do is I can say this dot positions Y. And I also want to say, is this a coin pool item? So I do want to copy that, and I want to init that as well. I'll scroll up, and I will say that it starts as true, maybe. And then we can go back down. I'm going to do a lot of scrolling, at least for now. It's gonna get better. It's gonna get more interesting. But let's go ahead and say this dot is coin pool item, and then the Bitcoin group. At some point, I'm going to have an error, and I will look at the console logs and figure out what I did wrong. But let's go ahead and say obstacle count. That looks good. Obstacle position. Obstacle group. Got to add this to it. And finally down here. And people are probably rolling their eyes that I'm just doing this manually. There's probably better ways, but this works because we're just kind of refamiliarizing ourselves with the code. All right, so let's look at the first physics collider. This is for the plane against the Bitcoin group, so any item in that object pool. So we say this, and these don't need to have a this on them because it's for this particular item. So we'll keep it as is, but the group itself, we need a this. Basically what we're saying here is if the plane collides with any of the coins, we want to check to make sure that particular coin is active, and that we're not currently exploding. If that's true, then we can hide that particular coin, and we can increase the score. So the score would be stored inside of the plane. It's defaulted to 0. I like not currently exploding, me too. So that's good. Let's go ahead and say this dot score text. What we can also do here is we can further change this small chunk. We can optimize how that behaves. So I'm going to comment it out. Instead of that, what we can do is we can say plane dot increase data. We're storing in a numeric and we're just increasing it. Pro tip: don't be actively exploding. Good pro tip. Score, and then we're just going to increase it by 1. And for the score, we're just going to say now plane dot get data. We're going to say score. That should work. I'm going to leave it commented out just in case it doesn't work and we have to revisit it, but it should be all right. Let's keep moving on as part of our cleanup goes. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that by the end of this, we are no worse than we started with, because we're just doing cleanup and creating this first initial separated scene. That way we can have multiple scenes in our game. So this dot plane, this dot obstacle group, once it's done, we'll restart. This is probably fine. What I will want to do for this right here is I need to make a change, because I won't have access to this inside of this particular function. So I need to do the following. I need to say null, and I need to say this. So I need to pass the scope so that way it's usable, just like I did with the obstacle group collider. So I'm going to save it. I think we're almost good. We're almost where we left off. So let's keep going. Let's copy that update. Here we go. So I'm going to paste that in somewhere down at the bottom. All right. So let's see here. This is for when we update. So let's go ahead and we're just going to add a lot of this. That's mostly what we're doing in this whole segment so far. So this, don't want to add this to the wrong things. Why I'm not doing a bulk here. Then I'm going to end up in more trouble than what I started with. So let's go ahead and say this. Distances is fine. All right, so this is where it gets wacky, I think. So we have positions Y, so this should be this dot position Y. We have, that's fine. The plane, I think what we want to do is this. And maybe we can get away with doing multiple here. Check it out. Yeah, I think we can get away with it. So we have positions Y. Let's go ahead and see how many we can select here. Looks good. And if you're curious on how I'm doing this, I was pretty amazed when I first learned how to do that as well. I'm actually pressing Control D. On Windows, on Mac, I think it's Command D, and that'll just let you select multiple. Might work. Go ahead and save it and see if we get any kind of errors. So I saved it. It's still running. I'm gonna go back into my game here. I'm gonna refresh it. That does not look good. So let's check it out. See what's going on here. Cannot read property frame of undefined. And I don't see a line number. Oh, line number 109. All right, this is probably because. Oh yeah, because I didn't wire it up to the index file yet. I did a lot of copying out of the index file, but I never actually finished wiring it up. So let's go check it out. So rather than just commenting out this section, I'm going to comment out most of this. Actually, I think I could do better than that. I'm going to comment out as much as I can. probably up until there. All right, so we're good on that angle. I also want to switch this over. This, instead of scene now with an object, I'm going to say that this is going to be gameplay scene, as referenced in this particular JavaScript file at the top. So gameplay scene. I'm going to save it. We're going to see if that fixes things for us. It did. So it looks like I can click to control my plane in the 3 different positions. Score is still being calculated, so our change to the score did take. And let's see what happens when we explode. Everything looks good, so it restarts. So we're where we left off, but we've got a very dedicated scene. So that could lead us into how we do things with Game Over. So let's go ahead and check it out. So let's go ahead and go back into the project. Get some water here. So let's make a game over scene. So that way, when we do crash, instead of immediately restarting, at least we can see our shame of failure and choose to retry. So let's create a new file. This is going to be game over scene, and there's no particular naming convention. I'm just making it up here. But let's do the same thing as what we did. So let's go ahead. I'm going to copy some of this to start, and we'll just finish it off. But paste that in. This can be game over scene. And then we need each of our lifecycle functions. We're going to say init. And actually, let's not cause that problem again. Maybe reload. I know that we're going to need to create. We probably won't need an update, but I'm going to add it anyways. Not going to hurt us. All right, so we need to figure out what we want to do. So at a minimum, we want to display some text that we've now exploded. So let's go ahead and look at our create. We're gonna do text creation like what we saw in the gameplay scene, but we're just gonna reposition it differently on the screen. So maybe we say this.text, and we can say, or not this.text, this.add.text. We can position it. I know that my scene is 1280 by 720, so let's cut it in half. So 640 by 360, and let's just go ahead and say game over. We'll start with that. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to set the origin, because if I don't set the origin on the text and I try to center it like that at 640 by 360, it's not going to be centered. It's going to be at the edge of that point. So if I set the origin to 0.5, it's going to be at the midway point. So the origin could be between 0 and 1. So let's go ahead and check it out. And we didn't actually wire it up. So let's go ahead and go to the index. I am going to clone that line and say that this is game over scene. And I'm also going to add it here. So I'm going to say game over scene. All right. So one thing that we need to do to actually make it to the game over scene is I need to, instead of saying this.scene restart, we need to think about saying this.scene.start should be the command. And we need to specify the scene that we want to start. And in this case, it's going to be game over scene. And I think that should be good. So let's go ahead and restart. And I'm just going to crash, hopefully right away. All right, it's small, but it did its thing. So, of course, the collision happened. We played our explosion animation. Based on our logic, we waited till the explosion animation was done, and then we transitioned. Doesn't sound like a real possible. I see. This guy. All right, making some jokes there. Always happy to have you on the stream, Crutchcorn. You always make it that much more special. Crutchcorn has his own stream too. He does some good stuff with React development. So if you're into React and React Native, definitely worth checking it out. Crutchcorn, I give you permission. Uh-oh, bearer of bad news. Don't tell me you're done. Uh-oh. I'll wait for you to do whatever you're typing, and I will proceed. So I will proceed to making this text larger. I think what we want to do is we want to display the score that we had before we got exploded, and maybe a retry button. And oh no, I was just being a dork. All right, no bad news. All right, perfect. Crutchcorn, share your stream so that way people can check yours out as well. I full permission to give you to post that link. Deem the shameless plug. Perfect. All right. Anyways, let's go back into the code and let's start editing that game over scene. So we have our text. It's not very large. So what we might want to do is, well, let's go ahead and add some configuration information. So for one, maybe we say that we want the font size, I don't know, to be like 60. I think it defaults at like 12. It's pretty small to start with. The color, maybe we make it black instead of white. Something that on that particular background color would be easier on the eyes. Maybe we add boldness to it. So we say font style. Say bold. And we could add a background color to it if we want. It might make a little more snazzy. Testing something. Posted the Polyglot Dev Twitch link. Curious to know what you're testing, but I will allow it. Let's go ahead and add some padding and some background color just to make it a little more snazzy. Let's go ahead and say maybe the background color is white, maybe to like represent kind of like clouds, because that's kind of the theme of our game. And let's go ahead and say maybe the padding. Let's say maybe the padding is 10. I'll save it. Let's go ahead and also add some other kind of placeholder text for when we start doing some more interactions. Say, for example, our score and that retry button, so that way we can play again. Let's go ahead and start with the score maybe. So we're going to say this.add.text. Let's give it a position. What I actually want to do is I want to copy the position from the other scene. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it look identical to whatever we had here. And I'm just trying to figure out where we put it inside this code. Looks good right here. I'm actually going to just copy it. All right. So what we need to do is we will at some point need to adjust this score to be whatever we lost with, but we'll get to that in just a second. Finally, let's go ahead and add that I guess retry button. So we're gonna say this dot, I don't know, retry button equals this dot add dot text. Give it a position. We know that the scene is 1280 by 720. Let's go ahead and maybe pick something that's towards the edge of the screen. We can adjust this as necessary. So 1125 in the X, maybe 625 in the Y. Always change it. And then we say maybe retry. And as far as style information goes, let's make it a little more stylish, kind of like what we did with the other items. So the font size, maybe we say that it's 40. Maybe we say that the color is going to be black again. And font style is going to be bold. Still curious to know what Crutchcorn's up to. Said he's testing something, but left me hanging. Let's go ahead and say that maybe our I don't know, maybe our padding is the same background color. is going to be white again. And I realize up here that this is not white, so let's go ahead and just make it white for the sake of this game over screen. And then finally, maybe we add some padding. And this could be 10 again, at least for now. Crutchcorn says, I'll never know. Thanks, Crutchcorn. I'll save it. Retry won't do anything, score won't do anything, but at least we have something to look at. So let's go ahead and refresh it. And we won't worry about the score, although it's going to die right here anyways. So let's check it out. All right, we have a score, we have a game over, and we have a retry. It could be dropped a little lower, but I'll let it slide for now. It was a hover effect that provides more meta on the channel I can find elsewhere. All right, interesting. What we want to do is we want to pass the score information, and then we also want to make this clickable. I'm clicking it, but nothing's happening. So let's go ahead and check it out. Let's go ahead and first accept the score. So this is actually really easy. Inside the init can accept some variables from the previous scene. So in the form of data. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say this.score equals data.score. And then when I go down into score down here, I'm going to say plus this.score. And how do I get that score? Well, I'm going to go to gameplay scene. I'm going to go to wherever I exploded. And I don't even know where that is. It's somewhere over here. That's Bitcoin, but I'm going to remove this comment. All right, so we exploded here. This is where we changed the scene. And this is where I can provide an extra object. In this case, it's score. And the score is going to be plain dot get data. And this is going to be score. That should be good enough for that. We also want to add retry. So this is where we go into the game over scene. And we start messing around with this retry button, which could really be named anything. So first of all, what I want to do, and actually for readability, I'm just going to add some spacing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that retry button needs to be interactive. This text needs to be interactive because by default it's not. I'm going to say this dot retry button dot set interactive. All right, so now that it's interactive, I need to figure out what happens when there's a mouse down event or a pointer down event. So I'm going to say this dot retry button dot on. I'm going to say pointer down. And if that happens, then what I can do is I can say this dot scene dot start, and I'm going to say gameplay scene. And we don't need to pass anything to the gameplay scene. That's good enough. So let's go ahead and save it. Let's go ahead and save it. Let's go ahead and try to refresh it and see if our score is kept. And we're also going to see a retry. Be 1. It's not. It's undefined. Perfect. So let's figure out what's going on, and we can work our way backwards. So let's at least see if retry works. And retry does work. Perfect. So let's go ahead and see why our score did not work. So where did I make my mistake? I have to print it out to the terminal, but we'll see. For the heck of it, I am going to say console.log .score. Not that it matters. I'm also going to say console.log data. Save it and to go back. That is odd. I feel like it should have worked, but you never know. I make bugs all the time. So score is undefined, but it did in fact say that there was a score field, so it's a start. So whatever I was trying to pass obviously did not exist. So plane.destroy. All right, so here's why. I destroyed the plane before I tried to get the data. So the plane didn't exist. So let's just go ahead and move it up a line. And it should be fine. So let's go ahead and maybe remove this. I'm pretty confident that it's going to work. Like my single coin and then crash. Bam, it works. I got the ultimate high score of 1 right now. So far so good. We set off and we completed our second goal of this particular stream. So our first goal was to clean everything up. Second goal was to have multiple scenes. Now what we want to do is we want to have audio, because it's a better game when you have sound effects. So let's go ahead and check it out. High score of 1. That's WR pace. What is WR? I'm not good with abbreviations like that. I'm old. You have to remember I'm old, so I can't keep up with that. World record. All right, perfect. All right. Way to go, Crutchcorn. I'll send you this. I'll send you this game after, and you can break my high score with 2. It'll be awesome. So what we want to do is we want to create some sound effects. I'll TAS it. Definitely don't know what that means either. Starting to think that you're making stuff up, but that's all right. This reminds me that I should probably push one of the buttons on my Stream Deck, just because. Why not? So here's a shameless plug right there to follow. Anyways, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up a digital audio workstation software to make our sound effects. So I don't have any sound effects created as of right now. We're going to make them. Not going to go ahead and bust a jam for a game loop. These are just strictly going to be sound effects, but the same logic can be applied when it comes to actually creating background music and things like that. So I am going to use a software called Reaper. Fortunately, it is not free. I did pay for it. You could use GarageBand. You can pay somebody to make your music. It doesn't really matter. But I am just going to create some custom tunes here, and we're going to use them in our game. And I apologize, I don't think I can zoom in, unfortunately, in this software. But I will walk you through what I'm doing. But it should be, I'm hoping, self-explanatory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here. I'm going to create a new track. This track is going to be microphone appropriate. And I am going to actually, so when we collect a coin, I know that for a lot of people, the first thing that comes to mind is the sound that you hear on Mario when you hit the box and you get the coin. I thought I could reproduce something like that. I couldn't. So I have this bell right here. Move some windows around and make everyone can see it. I have this bell. It's just a restaurant bell, nothing fancy. I thought that if I could hit it, that would be a cool sound effect, but it plays too long. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the bell, and I'm just going to. That's going to be the sound effect that plays when we hit a coin. It's not great. I'm sure everyone can do better. If you've got a piano, I'm sure you can hit a key and it will sound more like a coin than this. But I'm working with what I have. I'm not a very talented musician, so it should work out. So let's go ahead and check it out. I am going to hit the record button. Did twice, just in case. So let's go ahead. For whoever's watching the stream, Crutchcorn, can you tell me if you hear this when I play it back? I did twice. Oops. Yep, perfect. So that way I set up OBS correctly. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to just cut it. Again, this is my hacky DIY approach to being awful at creating sounds. But let's go ahead and trim it. And I will get it right here too. All right. That to the beginning. Let's just validate one more time that we're good. All right. I think that works good enough. So let me export it. I'm going to call this ding, and I will just I don't know, put it on my desktop. And make it an MP3. And that looks fine. Perfect. All right, let's see if I can minimize some windows here. You moved the window at the same time as very nice. Go ahead and drop that in. And I'm going to drop the ding into the assets. Looks good. And let's go back into Visual Studio Code. And now we're going to actually string up that audio. Let's go into our gameplay scene and go back into our preload where we're adding our assets. And I'm going to say this dot load dot audio. This, I'm going to call it ding. So this is going to be my phaser reference. And then I'm going to reference the file. So it's going to be assets/ding.mp3. The reason why I did an array here is because you can provide multiple audio file formats. So if you've got WAV or other, this makes it for maximum compatibility. I think MP3 you can get away with on most browsers, but you have the options. I'm going to save it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually add it to the scene. So it doesn't really matter where you add it. I'm going to add it up here, but it's going to be in the create function. And I'm going to say this.ding equals this.sound.add. I'm going to use the phaser reference here. And I'm going to say that it's non-looping, so false. So I'm going to save it. So it's added to the scene, but it's not playing until we go into the collider for Bitcoin, and I'm just gonna throw it in there. So I'm gonna say this.ding.play. I'm gonna save it. Let's go back into our browser. I'm gonna refresh, and hopefully, Crutchcorn, if you're still there, you'll have to tell me if you can hear the dings. But let's see what we get. We hear some dings. Maybe. I'm going to say that possibly we have some dings. I will revisit this ask to see if it's actually working again after we do the explosion. All right, so let's go ahead and work on the explosion sound effect. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. We don't need that anymore. Go ahead and create a new one. So again, I thought about some things that could make an explosion sound effects prior. I figured, you know what, maybe I can crinkle up some paper to make that sound effect. I'm just going to use like some whisper noises out of my mouth. Again, I'm not a great musician or creative artist on this stuff. You saw the drawings inside the game. They're not the greatest. But they prove the point. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do my best at an explosion here. Go ahead and check it out. All right, so let's go ahead and check it out. Let's see what that sounds like. All right, not bad. All right, so let's go ahead and use it. I think I like the second one better. So I am going to cut it. Got to use some imagination on some of this stuff. Probably fine. Drag it over. Do the add some reverb. I would if I knew how. I'm a basic user of this software, but I'm sure it's possible. But yeah, it would be interesting to see what it would sound like with reverb. Let's go ahead and export it. This is going to be, instead of ding, I'm going to call this one maybe explosion. And that's probably fine. All right, let's go ahead and drag it to the appropriate directory and see what we get. I'm gonna go back up to my preload. I'm gonna clone it. One I'm gonna call, for phaser's sake, explosion again, and the file is explosion.mp3. I am going to add it to the scene. This is going to be explosion. And inside of my collider, I am going to say this.explosion.play. And I'm going to save it. So let's go ahead and see what our coins and our explosions sound like. I'm going to refresh and get some coins, make sure they still work. Didn't make it. But it sounded like it was there. Can somebody confirm in the chat that sound effects were able to be heard? Not bad for an explosion, right? For a sound effect. Like I said, you could add background music in the same way. Basically, you would set that loop to true, and you would just play it right there in the create or whenever necessary. You could add a ton of different reasons for sound effects. Maybe your player is walking. Maybe I want to add a sound effect for my plane flying. I could go, I don't know, whatever a plane sounds like when it's flying through the air. Who knows? I'm sure tons of people know. But let's go ahead and maybe bring this project to a close. I think we're at a good point to end it. But just to recap, this was inspired by a game I had built in Unity, which the Unity version looks a lot better because I didn't do it live. I spent a little bit more time on the graphics, and the sound effects I actually paid for. But unfortunately, I lost everything on as far as the assets and the code. But we have our obstacles, we have our coins, we fly around in the same fashion. The clouds fly in the same fashion as far as tile sprites go. When we hit an obstacle, we explode. Takes us to another scene. We're getting a score. Score is handled a little bit differently in this game. Went a little bit more extravagant. But let's wait for it to crash. Explosion looks a little better in this circumstance too. What I didn't do is I didn't fancy up that screen right there. But for the most part, that's the same game. And we didn't use a whole lot of code. I think I probably used a ton more code in Unity at the time because I was pretty new to development in general at that time. But we did quite a bit in Phaser. So I mean, if we go over to our game now, and not as sexy as the Unity version, but given that all of this was done live and only live, not too bad. So let's just walk through the code one more time. So in this particular stream, we focus strictly on scenes and cleanup and audio. So the audio wasn't really any different than just adding images. If you have other audio files, go ahead and add them to that array. When it comes to playing the audio, it's just play it. For our cleanup, we just moved everything into its own separate scene file, and we added a this to everything to make it a member variable for the class. Inside of the index.html, we cut pretty much everything out of it. So let's delete that big long comment. And this is kind of what we were left with. We added our two scenes here, and we started our game for our game over scene. Actually, let me save this before I forget. For our game over scene, it's just a bunch of text. We did accept data from the previous scene, and we did make a piece of text interactive, so that way when we clicked it, we just went back a scene. So not too bad. If you did want to catch this video on demand, like the others, they are all uploaded on my YouTube channel, which I'm adding to the chat right now. So check them out. This is the series 1 of this particular game design with Phaser. I'll probably at some point in time redo this in Unity for the stream. May do other stuff with Phaser, may do other stuff with Unity. Definitely a fun topic to play around with. Game development is really fun, and you don't have to have any kind of special skills to accomplish it. You saw my skills. Terrible at drawing, terrible at audio. The programming involved, there's not, with modern game frameworks, there's not a lot of things that you have to consider on your own. You don't have to worry too much about the physics engines. You don't have to worry about collisions, things like that. On top of this, if you do go over to the blog, I actually did do a few tutorials on different sections of this game. So not all of them have published. I've kind of been doing them as I've been streaming. So I stream, then I write the tutorial about the concept. So this one just being collisions, just so that way if you want a refresher on everything that we've done. Trying to think that if there's anything else. I'm not sure when the next stream will be. They kind of just happen randomly. But if you're around and you want to participate, or even if you have any suggestions on what you'd like me to stream about, I'd be happy to do that as well. So with that, I think thank you everyone for participating.